Well, welcome everybody to the first episode of Be Nimble, Improving Cultural Attractions. I'm Eric Moraczewski, the CEO of Nimble Strategies. Nimble was founded really based upon my experience as a CFO at Gallagher & Associates, one of the largest museum design firms in the world, as the CEO of FDI Strategies, a leader in international strategy development, and as the executive director of the Gateway Arch Park Foundation, the nonprofit partner of Gateway Arch National Park, responsible for the largest public-private partnership in National Park Service history. At Nimble Strategies, we work with nonprofits, small businesses, and public-private partnerships on strategy, leadership development, and change management. Today, I'm proud to be joined by Dion Brown, our Managing Director of Nonprofit Services. Dion joined Nimble after leading incredible attractions like the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, the National Blues Museum, and the B.B. King Museum. Prior to working with museums, Dion spent 21 years in the Air Force, and considering tomorrow is Veterans Day, we couldn't be prouder to have Dion as a part of our team at Nimble.
Thank you.
Our special guests today are Brian Hall. Brian is the CMO of Explore St. Louis, the Convention and Visitors Bureau of the St. Louis region. I've had the good fortune of working with Brian for the better part of 5 years now. It kind of seems hard to believe. Primarily, we worked together a lot while renovating the Gateway Arch in the surrounding area. And our other special guest today is Dan Peltier. Dan is currently a senior writer and reporter for Publicis Sapient after spending nearly 5 years as a travel writer with Skift, who's best known for their travel insights. I met Dan while Skift was writing a story on the renovation of the Gateway Arch. I would like to note, please feel free to send in questions via the Q&A tab. We'll do our best to answer them as we go through. There will also be a couple polls that are really just there to make sure we're directing the conversation along the paths that relate best to your interests. So with that said, let's let our guests share their expertise, and let's open up. But after our great conversation to prep for this, Dan, what are some of the things you're seeing with the change from business to personal travel and how that might affect cultural attractions?
That's a great question. Thanks for having me on this. This is a great opportunity. And I think what's important to recognize right off the top is that there still is so much going on at cultural institutions and museums, particularly during this pandemic. Many have been able to successfully navigate, online offerings, and many were also well-versed at virtual experiences, things like that have become so mainstream now, even before COVID hit. But I guess in the hospitality space, you're hearing a lot about hotels that are pivoting to leisure that before, maybe leisure was a second thought. They were primarily a business hotel. And that's really changed the game in terms of strategy for hospitality. For cultural attractions, I would think that also would have an impact in terms of who's visiting. When you think about who's visiting a destination now, you're having in bigger cities like New York, LA, Chicago, Boston, these big, financial hubs. Now it's primarily a leisure audience, whereas before, I don't know the exact breakdown, but business travel was obviously a lot better. And obviously, many business travelers also have a little fun and check out the destination while they're traveling, but you're not getting that as much now. What you are getting is maybe some of the same people who maybe live close by, but they're not traveling for business. Instead, they're taking their family to a museum or a park or a restaurant, and they're just, in there. They're wearing their leisure traveler mom and dad hat, not suited up for the business meeting. And so I think that has at least impacted and changed how these cultural institutions are engaging with guests, the kind of experiences that they're offering, and what they're planning for for the year ahead. And I know we're seeing a lot of that in New York City, where I'm based.
Brian, great kind of segue into you. I mean, how are you changing your perspective on reaching those audiences then?
Well, we view the hospitality industry as basically a three-legged stool. We've got leisure customers that support one leg. We've got business travelers who support a second leg. And then the last is group travel, including meeting and convention activity. So this of the three legs, we've basically largely suspended travel for two of the three. As Dan indicated, the active segment right now is leisure, individual travel, and it's coming from a drive radius predominantly. We carefully monitor employment statistics, and while we've seen some upticks and perhaps a nascent recovery of business travel, I fear that we're sliding backwards once again as COVID case levels are spiking, and I think that many organizations are encouraging their business travelers to stay home, much less even go into the office. And so as a result, we're seeing very anemic levels of production coming from that segment. When it comes to group activity and meetings and conventions, we've experienced hundreds of cancellations here at America Center. Certainly event activity is antithetical to distancing, even though many in our community and many in communities around the United States have found remedies to creating hybrid event opportunities, and some of them are happening and they can be done safely. But nonetheless, we think that many event organizers have thought better of attempting to hold their meeting out of fear that they would be subject to lawsuits in reference to COVID, and or they wouldn't be able to make ends meet financially. So what we are left with, if you will, is a leisure traveling audience who've been enormously resilient. They're driving to our community from about a 300 to 400 mile radius. They are spending money, despite the fact that hotel deals and discounts right now across the United States make having a leisure travel experience just enormously affordable. We're finding actually that some of the higher end hotels like a Ritz-Carlton and a Four Seasons are doing particularly well because people want to have an indulgent experience. They want to find a way to escape the present reality that surrounds them. As far as cultural institutions are concerned, there's been great momentum in our community to return to cultural institutions, ranging from art museums to, we've got a world-class zoo in Forest Park. We have an aquarium in downtown St. Louis. They've all put practices and protocols in place to keep people safe, and they're doing reasonably well as far as their commercial activity at present.
Great. I mean, I think that's important. It's not that we all have to just stay inside in our homes 100% of the time. I think it's just doing these things responsibly. I think, what are those responsible actions that your own organizations are taking, and what are you seeing that's working really well, especially in the cultural institutional landscape? Either one.
I'll jump in first, and Dan, then you can add. Beginning on the 18th of May, our organization, as the destination marketing organization for St. Louis City and County, actually teamed up with industry, in addition to public health officials in St. Louis City and County, and we actually helped write the protocols because we wanted to take the health imperatives, the health safety imperatives, and translate them into the operating reality of restaurants, attractions, cultural institutions, venues, hotels, retail establishments, etc. So we teamed up with a cross-section of the community, and we wrote extensive protocols and communicated them widely, and actually conducted training so that every organization as a stakeholder in this community that was making plans to open could understand how they could open and be a safe environment for both their staff as well as the guests that would be coming through. We believe those practices have largely worked in our community, and they are keeping people safe. In fact, I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later. We just opened a new exhibit here at America Center, Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, and we're having an enormous amount of success with ticket sales, in addition to convincing folks and demonstrating it, in fact, when they come, that there's a safe environment that surrounds them, and they're not putting themselves in harm's way having a tourism experience. So not only do I think it's important that we put the procedures and protocols in place, but I think concurrently we need to demonstrate to customers in all forms of communication and the experience itself that the protocols are in practice and that they are indeed being treated responsibly and safely.
Yeah, up in New York City, I guess I can speak to what I've been noticing from our destination marketing organization, NYC and Company. They've really been making a play. I mean, they had been for several years, but also really making a play for locals to step up and become tourists in their own cities. Right now on their website, if you look, they have really nice packages for, they call it neighborhood getaways. And obviously New York City is so big, you could drive a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, and still be in the city, but feel like you're in a completely different world. And to some extent, it is a getaway. And I think there's something to be said for encouraging something like that, where you're already comfortable with traveling or moving about your own city, versus asking somebody right now to hop on a plane and go somewhere that they've never been. So I think there is something to that strategy, especially right now. And this has been a really big topic in the DMO space for several years now, talking about over tourism and how some destinations are getting overrun. And unfortunately, COVID-19 is an overcorrection for that. We wanted to curb tourism, but no, not by this much, unfortunately. But I think you are seeing a lot of success with that. I know some of the museums now, like the Met and the Whitney, really popular in the city, and for international travelers too. Now 90% of their guests in September, they're reporting, were local or surrounding regional visitors, and now they're considering themselves kind of local museums, or at least that's what news articles are referring to them as. So I think that's an interesting strategy that you'll see more of in the weeks and months ahead.
Dan, what we found in this region is about 30% of our arrivals originate here in St. Louis, and roughly 70% come from within a 300-mile radius of the community. So you're absolutely right. Being a tourist in your own town is alive and well. People want to stay close to home. They want to. They don't want to get on a plane if they don't have to. And exploring or re-exploring. We actually call our campaign Re-Exploring St. Louis, and our organization's name is Explore St. Louis. So there's a suggestion implied in that you know us already, so come back. And that's very reassuring, I think, to both residents here in our community to be a tourist in their own town, as well as those communities that orbit St. Louis, to tell them that come on back and have a tourism experience where you're going to be safe and you're going to be comfortable.
Hey, Brian. This goes to you because we spoke a little bit on it. The exhibition you just had open. So we're trying to attract our local people here at home to come visit and to still be able to have that experience. Walk us through the space, and just as a time ticketing, how does that process work? So somebody like me that's super cautious, that's going to wear a mask and believe in social distancing, but would love to get out to see something and do something.
Sure. We've put just a robust series of protocols in place, and I'll just kind of bring it from the beginning, and that is when you buy a ticket. First of all, the event is Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. The idea is that you can get up close and personal with the renowned frescoes that adorn the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. So simply put, we're bringing Rome to St. Louis since you can't fly to Rome right now. And to underscore safety, the first aspect that we put into place is that we're selling time tickets. We have a capacity of 100 people that can come through the exhibit per hour. That is half of what we're actually allowed. So the public health folks said that we could host 200 people per hour. We halved that. We reduced it to 100 people per hour. And so you buy a time ticket, you arrive at our venue. The first thing that's going to happen is that you come through our touchless entryway. We just put in touchless doors through all the major entrances to America's Center. We've removed the old doors where you used to have to come up and use handles. That's very 1990s now, and certainly the 21st century way of doing things is approaching the door and have the door open for you, no touch. You walk in, and the first thing that's going to take place is that a thermal imaging camera will read the temperature on your forehead. And it'll give a readout to an attendant, a security attendant seated opposite watching the monitor. And we're going to know that your temperature is not in excess of 98 degrees or 99 degrees. I think it's calibrated. And if it is, we're going to do a secondary check, and we're going to come up to you with a touchless thermometer, and we're going to double check. And naturally, if your temperature exceeds the limit and requirement that the CDC indicates where you're running a temperature, we're not going to permit you to enter the exhibit. Our facility is GBAC STAR certified. That's the Global Biorisk Advisory Council. We're a STAR certified facility, meaning that we disinfect each day. We meet a global cleaning standard. If you haven't heard of GBAC, it's something that you're going to be hearing a lot about. Major hotel companies like Hyatt have certified all of the hotels in their portfolio. Major event venues across the United States are stepping up, and they're receiving the GBAC STAR certification as well. You enter the exhibit, Dion. The exhibit is spread out over 27,000 square feet, a wide open and expansive ballroom. We hang the frescoes on trusses on both sides of the ballroom. In addition, the works of Genesis are all immediately above you in the center, exactly the same way that they're presented in the Sistine Chapel. We actually, through the layout of our carpet, there are large medallions in the carpet that lend themselves to creating social distancing pods so that you can actually move from one to the next and take in the experience with a listening device that helps curate and tell the story that you can either download onto your smartphone or for a nominal fee you can purchase a device that we will loan to you that's been completely sanitized, and you can take in the experience that way. So we opened last weekend, and we had roughly 1,000 customers come through, and the reports were everybody felt very safe and inspired concurrently, and certainly we were delighted with the response in reference to ticket demand. People want to be able to have safe experiences right now and get out of the house. Let's face it, we all need a cure for cabin fever. So we're off to a very good start. We're cautiously optimistic that this is going to be a resounding success as we are going to have this exhibit available through January 10th.
One of the things I thought was really fascinating that you were doing as a part of the exhibits was integrating technology into it. And I think we're seeing technology as a bit of a saving grace right now when it comes to cultural institutions. In March, we really saw a lot of national institutions stepping up and really putting their galleries, their artifacts on display online. I think we're going to see more and more of that from all types of exhibits, and content is going online. I know, Dion, when you were at the National Blues Museum, you made a big push of putting your concerts online free of charge to get it out there to the public, and so that people could tune in from around the world to experience the great things that you could bring to a broader audience. what are some things that you're doing personally, at the America Center, or some of the things you guys are seeing that you've seen work really well, or that you've just really enjoyed when you've been out doing some of these things?
Dan, you want to weigh in?
Sure, yeah. I know for several years now, and I always give this example, the Met Museum in New York has made virtually all of their collection available on their website and on their apps. So say you want to go and visit, I don't know, you're interested in some kind of European art, but say that gallery or that wing is closed for renovations, or what have you. Well, it's available online and you can still view it. It's not the same as seeing it in person, but you can still, the opportunity is still there to engage with it, to learn about it, maybe to hear something about it from the artist, if they're still alive, or from an artist or historian. There's still opportunities to engage digitally and have that connection with the artwork or artifacts in a museum. And I think it's interesting, and it makes me wonder, is this the COVID, is this the reckoning for everyone to realize that really the museum goes beyond the boundaries of its four walls, or however many walls it has? I mean, does this fundamentally change how you view a museum? It's not just a brick and mortar building you go to, it's an experience that you can have wherever you are and whenever it's convenient for you, where you can constantly have a dialogue with the collection or with the curators or with artists, not just the once or twice a year that you visit it. I think that's something that you'll see changing a lot. And I know in New York City, again, NYC and Company just launched a couple of weeks ago virtual NYC with a curator edition, which will feature interviews and events with curators of different exhibits from museums across the city, which I thought was really interesting. So in that regard, it's really highlighting people who make these museums what they are, and give them the popularity and the beauty for why so many people choose to visit them every year. So in that regard, it's a positive thing that we're hearing from more of these voices, and being able to see more diverse perspectives represented in these institutions. And I think that will only increase. And really, I mean, going to these museums and institutions, it's a communal experience. Really, you go there with friends and family. It's better to enjoy that experience with other people. So I think even if you can't visit during future pandemics, hopefully not, but even virtually, I think it just gives more people more opportunity to share in that experience and that learning with people, their friends or loved ones. So I think while museums obviously would want more people in there, I don't think anything could ever replace the in-person experience, and that will continue to come back. I think it is democratizing the experience for more people.
Dan, I agree with you wholeheartedly. About 10 years ago, organization, I think it was Google actually, approached us when I was at the B.B. King Museum. And it's changing the paradigm, breaking the paradigm. They wanted to give us a chance to go virtual. And my board was upset when they said, well, if we go virtual, nobody will want to come. And as I told my board, I lost that argument at the time, but I would win it now. All it does is get you outside the four walls, get you in front of a crowd that they may be surfing where to go, but there's nothing like that in-person experience. Just like at the National Blues Museum, we did live music. People thought that by doing it live, streaming it live, it would stop people from wanting to come. You can watch it, but when you can be in person, that intimacy. So I'm 100% blind. I had just talked to another friend of mine at a museum, and I told him what you guys should be doing is story time, because part of their exhibit is story time. It's story time. And they should do a little 5-minute vignette of story time just to get out there, because right now their attendance is pretty bad, like a lot of museums. But at least it keeps them out there in front of their audience. It'll make those people who are fans of theirs come just to look. And that just keeps us on their mind. So I agree with you. I think there's nothing like the in-person. experience, but until then, we've always said we got to get outside of our four walls to attract more viewers, attract more attention. So
I agree completely, Dion. What we saw here in St. Louis is that at the very inception of the pandemic, there was a big move among cultural institutions to virtualize their programming. And the most visited pages of our website were those that carried virtual cultural institution content during that time period. And I heard from countless parents throughout the community that they were taking the virtual content on our website and using it as social studies curriculum for their kids. So just think about that. I mean, when it comes to exposing a whole new generation to the content of various cultural institutions, not only here in St. Louis, but around the United States, technology provided an opportunity to do that. The other thing is that I think that technology does not replace an in-person experience. I think technology can actually enhance it, courtesy of deepening the story and the context, but also, Dan, you were talking about over-tourism. Well, in the Sistine Chapel and in the Vatican as a whole, they have an abundance of tourists, or had, and they will again. And they actually move people so quickly through the Sistine Chapel that you really can't see much of anything. And they recognize that, and you're 65 feet beneath these frescoes that are absolutely magnificent. So what they saw is an opportunity to reduce tourism consumption in the Sistine Chapel and at the Vatican by licensing the rights to a promoter to be able to reproduce these great works and to bring them to cities around the world and invite people to come out and enjoy them. So that was actually a deliberate plan by the Vatican to be able to reduce in-person tourism at the Sistine Chapel and push it to communities throughout the United States. But then technology enhances the experience, because one of the really cool things that you can do in the exhibit is you can walk up to any fresco with your cell phone with an app installed, aim it at the fresco, and it will recognize it, and it will immediately start telling you about the biblical scene that is being depicted and created by Michelangelo, which I thought was just a fantastic use of 21st century technology for paintings that were actually created in 1505.
Brian, you're the marketing guy. You're supposed to take credit for that idea. I also need
some way, shape, or form, I'll find a way.
Yeah, I need to point out also, I got a text message while you were talking about the online applications and parents using them, and I got a text message from someone on this saying, you know, they did that with their kids during COVID, and they loved that, and the kids loved it because it was engaging and it was different than, you know, what we were going to pull up from anywhere else. And so, you know, one, thank you, but two, you know, I think it's something that a lot of people are finding new, unique ways to really celebrate. Dan, you were starting to chime in, I think, and I interrupted.
No, yeah, I think that's great. And anecdotally, you know, hearing from friends and family doing very similar things, like the world is really your classroom now. And I know there are probably parents listening that are like, oh my gosh, like, when are we going to get back to normal? But I think now we are recognizing more of the values of that these institutions have to offer. And, you know, the younger generations that are coming up that are engaging, like you said, your friend was through those apps, I think will grow up recognizing the educational value of these institutions, which is really promising. And then to Brian's point with the Vatican, that if there's anything to be inspired about, if a 2,000-year-old institution can be the catalyst to spur, you know, inadvertently technology and all these new innovations and help redistribute tourism and help people bring that experience to people who couldn't see it otherwise, I think there's hope for us. So
there's one other thing that, in reference to safety, and I'd love to get everyone's opinion on this, and that is, of course, when you come to the Sistine Chapel exhibit here at America Center, the one thing I omitted is that masks are required. And one of the decisions that we took as a marketing organization is that we will not feature a picture of a tourist who is unmasked. All of our inventory of photography, whether someone is at the Gateway Arch and taking in the Museum of Westward Expansion, or if they're at the Art Museum, the St. Louis Art Museum, they are going to have a mask on, because we wanted to model that behavior and set that expectation, because we have a mask mandate in this community, and I'm sure that many others communities representing communities around the United States have the same mask mandate. Some may not. We took a lot of flack, particularly when we would post on social media some of our principal talent that would have a mask on, saying that I'm not coming to your community if I have to wear a mask, and people found it political and insulting, which I guess is no surprise in the present environment. But the way we looked at it is that simply, if that's the way you feel about wearing a mask in a community that has a mask requirement, then maybe you shouldn't come, because we're going to insist that you wear it. So I just wanted to underscore that as an element of safety when it comes to marketing your institutions, I'd highly recommend that you set the standard and you be clear about what your expectation is from a safety standpoint. And if you have a mask mandate inside your institution, reflect that in your marketing.
I think that's a great point, Brian. And from an earned income perspective, I would be having masks made of my institution. So if you do come without one, hey, we got plenty here to sell. But I think in all marketing pieces during this time right now, I think that's pretty brilliant to say this is where we stand, and it's mandated, so we have to wear them, and we will enforce it. Because so many times people, as we talked earlier, can feel uncomfortable, regardless of what side you're on. You have a mask on, you be around people that don't, you can feel uncomfortable, and vice versa. But if you're sending the message from the beginning that masks are required, to me, the standard is already set, and I feel a lot comfortable coming in.
And I think that's important for that key demographic, which is locals, because locals should be used to that being when it's the mandate in a community. And right now, what we're seeing is mostly the tourism market is locals. What are some things that you're seeing people doing well that are beyond, what's in the imagery to encourage locals to return? I know we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but are there kind of some key marketing pieces that you're seeing utilized well that are working to get people back into public spaces, and especially cultural institutions?
I'll jump in and talk about a couple of the things that we did here in St. Louis during the baseball season. And for those of you that know St. Louis, you know that we love our Cardinals. We actually borrowed the MC for Cardinals in stadium game day broadcasts. His name is Todd Thomas, and we created Todd the Tourist. So Todd wasn't working in the stadium because we had no fans. So we brought Todd to cultural institutions throughout the community, and we filmed little video vignettes where he offered 3 clues as to his whereabouts, and you had the opportunity to guess where Todd was. We didn't make it all that difficult, and if you guessed correctly, you became eligible to win tickets to said attraction. The second thing that we did is we created a program called Staycation Saturday. It's a bit of a throwdown challenge. Where are you going to do your staycation this Saturday in St. Louis? What's on the agenda? And we've had just a lot of success in creating sort of a groundswell of support, because we have Staycation Saturday, and then we also created Takeout Tuesday to support restaurants, so that throughout the week, from a social media standpoint, we underscore with residents of this community the imperatives of supporting your cultural institutions over the course of the weekend, and then certainly supporting restaurants that we very much want to be there when the pandemic is over through Takeout Tuesdays.
Dan, anything you're seeing?
It's a good question. maybe not so much. We're such a bigger city than St. Louis, and I wish we had a more unified Takeout Tuesday. The closest thing we had to that was our 7 o'clock cheer back in the spring when we were when cases were really high in the New York area. But we don't really have, I mean, I try to do that as much as possible, but we don't really have a Takeout Tuesday initiative. But you do still see a lot of restaurants, and it's amazing too, the number of restaurants that I've seen open as new restaurants for the first time since the pandemic in the past 6 or 7 months that have opened, and new businesses and even new pop-up experiences that we've started to see, even with Broadway. I know last week, Eric, you were asking how, what's Broadway doing for the time being. There are off-Broadway pop-up performances that are happening across the city in secret locations, so you never know where it's going to be. You just happen to be in the right place at the right time, obviously to prevent crowds from forming, but that's been really successful so far, and getting, I guess, a lot of buzz. So that's.
Can I mention one thing in reference to these localized themes, and that is that they play really well with your media. I can't tell you how much earned media we've been able to secure from broadcast outlets throughout our community by talking about subjects like supporting restaurants, subjects like visiting cultural institutions, being a tourist in your own town and being safe about it, hotel performance, attraction performance. They love these story angles, and we found that that if we can package it and pitch it, they'll cover it, because they can't just do wall-to-wall pandemic day after day, because at some point somebody's going to turn them off. So they want some good news to be able to insert into that. And I can't tell you, I mean, a week and a half ago when we announced that Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel was coming here, the coverage we received, the accolades, the props, thank you, this is great, we love what you're doing, from the media community was absolutely heartening.
Do you think that's an important piece to throw in there, Brian, is while we do maybe ride the media for their negative stories and glorifying the negative, most of the people that I've ever talked to in the media are always really excited to tell the positive stories. And so, finding ways to get that on their radar so that they can get it covered is really important. But packaging it right is key as well, because you can't just expect them to cover it just because you feel it's great.
Yeah, no doubt. I mentioned Todd the Tourist. We pitched Todd the Tourist that we'll do morning show live shots with you from different locations in St. Louis. We actually had 2 broadcasters in this community, 2 affiliates, one Fox, one NBC, take us up on it. And they did live broadcasts from different institutions, different organizations, talking to Todd about where he was and why people ought to come out and see him there.
Yeah. I know the conversation I've been reading, about cities across the country is, going into the winter and, for the foreseeable future, how do museums, in New York at least right now, museums are capped at 25% capacity. So, the narrative you're hearing in the media, how can museums survive at that level for who knows, for how long, several more months, maybe a year. But from the visitor's point of view, there are so many people who don't like that crowded museum experience, especially, locals. They know the, most popular museum in their city is always a tourist hotspot. And that may be the biggest reason why they decide not to go, because they know it's always so crowded. And when they can go, maybe, they have other things to do, the museum is closed. So from a consumer's point of view, hearing 25% capacity, that's great for some people, and especially for this local crowd. They're like, wow, I can finally experience this exhibit how I've been wishing I could, without crowds of people surrounding me. Obviously it still is a challenge for the museum, but I would still think it would attract, you would still be able to get that 25% or whatever maximum that that you're allowed.
I think that's absolutely right. It becomes an advantage. And Eric, you know this from your experience at the Gateway Arch Park Foundation. A year after opening and investing some $380 million in transforming the experience, many St. Louisans were steering clear of it because they thought that there'd be too many tourists. And right now, they're operating at a 25% capacity. And the little tram cars that bring you to the top of the arch are actually operating at an even lower capacity to ensure distancing. When you get to the top of the arch, they actually have stanchions where each traveling party can stand. There's never been a better time to check out some of these tourism experiences.
Yeah, the old Yogi Berraism, which applies for both St. Louis and New York, but nobody goes there anymore. It's too busy. Yeah. So, I think this is really important for people to understand how they engage their local community. But I think, Brian, you touched on it earlier. The regional drive community is the other group that's coming and seeing these things. And what are you guys seeing that's working? What's bringing people into New York from New Jersey and Connecticut and Delaware and maybe Pennsylvania? What's getting people to come from those areas to New York right now? What's bringing people from Chicago and Kansas City and Louisville and Nashville and these other great Midwest cities? What's bringing people to engage with your community right now?
From a tactical perspective, Eric, we're finding a great deal of success with digital media. And in particular, when we feature outdoor scenes, we get more engagement and better click-throughs when we show people who are outside rather than inside. So we're doing that even for cultural institutions that are inside. We're reflecting the talent outside of the institution, suggesting that they're able to go in. The second thing that we are getting a lot of traction with is videography, content of people actually having a good time. And of course, they're always wearing their masks and they're always distancing as appropriate. But videography depicting families being families is actually doing resoundingly well as far as engagement and click-throughs. We're creating landing pages that are really robust so that when you click on the advertising, you come in and you're served up with a host of really interesting offers, opportunities, and experiences that you can take advantage of that are created or curated with a mobile device in mind. Because the vast majority of our browsers today are not browsing from a desktop, they're browsing from a mobile device. So I think those are some of the key things that we're trying to convey: use of digital media, featuring people outdoors, videography, and then just really sticky content when you bring them into your website and you feature a landing page.
Yeah, I would second all of that in terms of what I'm seeing. And I think so many people now have accepted that, to expect that, there are changes in place when you want to come to a museum and have these experiences, and they know what to expect, but still, preparing them with, a compelling video and imagery that, shows, families enjoying themselves just like they would have a year or two ago and still having fun while still being safe and taking those precautions is key. There's still, I know everybody, thinks of New York City for all of our museums and Broadway and indoor experiences, but there are still so many outdoor experiences to be had, especially this time of year in places like Central Park, which is pretty much at peak foliage right now. It's very late this year, but if you're around, it's a great time to come and not very crowded. So we're definitely seeing a lot. I definitely see a lot of people out enjoying the parks. Also, it's interesting, drive-in. I don't think this has come up yet, but drive-in movie theaters in New York. I think there had only been one in the city, and it was only in the summer, and it was kind of like had a speakeasy vibe, like it was secret and very exclusive. And now you have, I think there were 5 in the summer, and some are still operating. So that's actually been getting a lot of people from the metro area to come in and make a afternoon and night of it. There are restaurants and food trucks that pop up nearby. So that's actually been a big draw. Even if you don't have a car, people are still pulling up in blankets. So we'll see what the winter equivalent of that is. But for right now, that's still going strong.
Well, and I
Well,
think
Dan, we have something very similar here in St. Louis, and one organization is called The Lot. They've taken over a very large outdoor parking lot, and they're doing concert events that where the audience are all in pods, and you cannot leave your pod. You order your food with an app. They bring it to you. Everyone is in a mask. It's all done exceptionally well and very safely. We're actually in communication with this group because in answer to your question, what do you do when it gets cold and we enter the winter? Well, we happen to have a dome stadium, and it seats about 67,000 people. Obviously, with social distancing, it would be far fewer. But we are looking at the possibility of doing socially distanced concert events in pods in the dome. And we're also looking at movies. And I think that if you come in, watch a movie with your immediate family and be amongst other people, but not too close to them, with food trucks, could be a really fun experience.
I think actually we received a question, and it kind of ties in nicely to the conversation, especially for what do you do in the winter, and that people have been attending some fun different events virtually. Especially, I know we went to trivia night for the St. Louis Sports Commission, did a fantastic job at it with basically picking up your gift basket for the night ahead of time, and they had food and drinks ready for everyone. What type of virtual events are you seeing that work well for that engagement? And I think there's a fine balance, but it's really maybe a fun balance is better term than fine balance, in that these can be great fundraisers in a time where your funding is down, your ticket sales are down, your donations may be down, although actually we've talked to several groups that their donations are significantly up. I think primarily because you're not spending as much in other areas, and so you have the opportunity to support those groups in need. But the other piece to it then is that awareness of what you have to offer. And Dion touched on it a little bit with that story time idea that he was discussing. What are some of those things that are virtual events that are working well from a cultural attraction standpoint that you're seeing?
Well, I'll answer the question in reference to fundraising activity. We've had a lot of organizations approach us wanting to conduct their galas in a virtual fashion so that they can storytell, and they've got every opportunity to have their leaders connect with donors throughout the community. So we created a virtual meeting space that we call Stream Stage. And you can actually come in and you can put on a performance on our stage, which is known as the Ferrara Theater, and we'll broadcast it. We'll connect you with state-of-the-art technology to all of your stakeholders. And then we've teamed up with a couple of organizations, food and beverage providers in the community, with respect to a little movement known as Gala to Go. And we're curating really interesting assortments of food and wine so that you can have a complete gala experience now in the comfort of your living room, complete with wine and food and a great program. And people are enjoying it.
It's a really fun way to break up the monotony of, what are we going to do on Saturday night? Should we sit at home in this room and watch a movie, or should we sit at home in that room and watch Netflix? So yeah, I think they're great. I mean, we've talked to catering companies that are offering really customized cheese platters and bottles of wine. I know there's a local nonprofit that's about to kick off a wine tasting that's a virtual event. But I think there's also some really great ways to really touch on your key messaging as well, and who you are as an organization, and to build brand awareness. Dan,
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we've seen organizations do, Eric, is create some outstanding video content, telling the story about their organization in a fashion that you couldn't customarily do if you had to hold everyone's attention at a gala with 600 people. But you serve it up as a video vignette, and people are sitting at home and they're enjoying the content on their TVs or on their computers. You have a longer attention span and a much better opportunity, in our estimation, in many cases, to tell your story.
Yeah. Something I just saw the other day, more in the Broadway space, was Jagged Little Pill. It was actually a really popular show before the pandemic and had a bunch of Tony nominations. But they actually announced that they're bringing their cast back and will be streaming live Sunday, December 13th. I know I'll be tuning in. I regret not seeing it last year. But I think it's interesting. And you also have shows like What the Constitution Means to Me. That was a play a couple years ago. It's now streaming on Amazon. I've just been wondering why more shows aren't doing that or have found a way. But in either case, for Jagged Little Pill, that cast and the whole ecosystem around it, that's amazing news. And we'll see how that goes. But again, getting back to the Takeout Tuesday question that we had, you know, when you think about the whole Broadway experience, usually you're, you know, getting a meal beforehand, you know, getting drinks beforehand. So is there an opportunity, one, you know, let's see how this performance does, and two, again, to encourage more spending, you know, at restaurants, or, you know, why don't, while you watch this show at home, order, you know, takeout from your favorite restaurant. And keep in mind, $1.3 billion of economic impact last year in the city was attributed to the whole Broadway ecosystem and all the different spending that happens at businesses around. So that's huge. So even if we can just recapture a sliver of that, could go a long way for the next 7 or 8 months that we know of, at least, that Broadway is still, the lights are still off.
And I think that's, you know, really important. I mean, the beauty of cultural attractions is you do have a medium to share, right? It's not, so many nonprofits struggle with what should I be sharing as a content perspective, but cultural attractions have a purpose that is usually very visible and easier to share than maybe some other nonprofits do. And so I think, you know, it's important to really express what you're conveying on a daily basis, and whether that's Jagged Little Pill or whether that's you know, the Jazz St. Louis just had their 25th anniversary and did a gala for it. And great job. You know, I think it's also important, though, for people to remember you can't treat it the same as a regular gala. It can't just be, this was our agenda if people were in person, therefore it's our agenda if people are not here. You know, you need to find a way to keep people engaged, because the difference is, if I'm at your gala, I can't turn you off if I'm in person. If I'm at home, I can turn on 27 other things if I'm not enjoying the content. And so, you know, it's important to figure out how to best convey visually and emotionally and through sound the right ways for people to engage with you.
I understand. Brian or Dan, either of you, and maybe you haven't noticed it, but have you seen any collaborating between different cultural institutions? I say that because if I was still the president of a specific museum, knowing we can only get 25% capacity, I would be thinking down the road to how can I keep myself aware, partnering with another organization, because that's what donors like to see, is partnerships between other institutions. And so this is a time I would really be trying to strengthen those partnerships. Trivia night or any of these things that I could partner with and pull off as a joint venture with someone, I would do it. I just wonder if you've heard any chatter about different organizations wanting to give up their power by collaborating with someone.
Well, we've seen a very recent example in reference to a collaboration with respect to the exhibit that I've been discussing in reference to Michelangelo. We actually teamed up with the St. Louis Art Museum. We teamed up with the St. Louis Science Center, the Regional Arts Commission, and others in the community to stage and promote this event under the recognition that we've got a really large ballroom. We have every opportunity from a capacity standpoint, as you just suggested, to be able to accommodate it here. And it was seen as additive and not in conflict or somehow competitive with any of those other institutions. They were delighted to be involved in it. And I'm finding that there's just a great amount of camaraderie right now and shared sense of purpose in the travel and tourism community, because no other group has been as adversely impacted by this pandemic than us. And so I'm seeing unprecedented levels of cooperation throughout the community between constituent groups that you might not have necessarily thought went together.
Right. Yeah. I mean, from what I've been reading, most of the museums in my area are really singing, from the same sheet music, so to speak, and really advocating, their value to the community and the need for support from, local governments during this time. And I think, really at the end of the day, what they realize is that we're all in this together, but also we all have the same mission, is to enrich people's lives and educate and make people feel something and give people a great and meaningful experience, whether you're an art museum or a history museum. You're really all there to support the community and the visitors who patronize you and come. So I think it's really helping a lot of these museums remember or reacquaint themselves with the roles that they have in their communities and how important they are to local economies, which is the conversations that I've been reading about, which is great.
So we're 2 minutes out from our hour, and I want to be respectful of your times and the people watching. Is there anything you want to leave everyone with?
I would just like to say that we are going to make it through this. And I think that the recovery for travel and tourism is going to be absolutely meteoric and fantastic as soon as we can get this virus under control and get people vaccinated, because there's going to be such pent-up demand that I think that people are going to be coming out in mass, and hopefully we'll be overwhelmed with the demand.
Yeah, totally. I agree with Brian. And I think also it's important to consider that even when a vaccine is widely distributed, you'll probably have a certain percentage of visitors who, are still not comfortable not wearing a mask, for example, or not having hand sanitizing stations or these contactless experiences. Sorry. So just to keep those, some of these things will probably become permanent. So just to keep, obviously, so many people now are hyper aware of all of the different touch points that they could interact with germs and people. So I think this will be part of the psyche for a while, but at the same time, I think there is just so much pent up demand. People are willing to make very small sacrifices to stay safe. And, you're already seeing a lot of that come back in a lot of cities. So I think it's promising.
Dion, you got to unmute yourself if you want us to.
Yeah, I just thank you all, Dan and Brian. It's been a great time. Learned a lot over these last couple of weeks talking to you and bringing it out today. Thank you for your time and spending with Eric and I.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.
It's our pleasure.
Thank
Have
you.
a happy holiday and a safe one.
Thanks, and thanks for everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.